necessary. They've been pretty much sitting in that position for the last few hours, and the uncomfortable thing is yet to come. So when they are going through the blackout period, when it's really burning outside, they'll experience something like 3 to 4 Gs, and they've been in 0 G all these 6 months. So their body really can't pump blood and everything normally, so that will feel more like 6 to 8 G, and that's really gonna hurt.
It will be a sudden and dramatic change in conditions.
I believe that they will conduct the first orbit maneuver, attitude maneuver soon. The first attitude maneuver they will turn in direction for about 90 degrees from facing forward to the side. This is a very important preparation for the separation, as Professor Zhang have already mentioned. The first very critical separation is separation between the orbital module and the re-entry capsule.
Yeah.
Because you know that the total mass of the spacecraft is about 8 tons. So to reduce the mass and reduce the burden of the propulsion system, we first need to separate the orbital module. But please notice that this is a very critical step.
And we've got words from our gallery that in about 1.5 minutes, the orbital module is going to be separated from the re-entry module. Now, as we're watching live signals, there's communication adjustment. The first adjustment,
attitude maneuver.
The SHENZHOU-18 spacecraft is now adjusting its altitude.
Yeah, the direction. Look. Has already changed about 90 degrees.
Right.
And then the separation.
We could see from inside the capsule that the astronauts were making some movements, minor movements, their arms, and then there's this manual in their hands. What exactly is on that manual or notebook?
As Professor Zhang has already mentioned, they are still in the 0 G environment. So honestly speaking, they cannot feel very remarkable change about this attitude maneuver, because it only turns direction for 90 degrees in, strictly speaking, in your direction. The separation of the orbital module will leave the orbital plane of the remaining 2 modules.
This return trip is being watched closely, and now at this stage, this is the process where the re-entry capsule has separated from the propulsion module.
No. This is the first separation between the orbital module and the re-entry capsule. Look, on the screen we can see the 3D animation. The orbital module has already separated. Now you can see the remaining 2 parts are the re-entry capsule and the propulsion module.
And now we are seeing the second altitude adjustment.
Yeah, exactly. So with this adjustment of its direction, it will facing backwards. It's a preparation for the re-entry burn. Okay,
they've completed
accomplished.
The second altitude adjustment.
So we will soon see the burn of the main engine.
Right.
Please notice that the propulsion module has 4 main engines, each with a thrust of 2,500 newtons. Please note that we only need 2 of them. So you can see the other 2 as a redundancy to keep the safety of the astronauts. This is very important for us.
As we mentioned earlier, about 8 hours ago, the return module undocked from the Tiangong space station. What were some of the necessary steps, Professor Zhang, after the handover of the crews and before their return?
Right.
So from the screen, you can see the main engine has already ignited. You can see on the 3D animation, you can see the flame of the main engine. And also you can see the small flames are the working of the small engines called attitude control engines to keep the whole procedure stable. You see there are all kinds of errors disturb the main engine. So we need the attitude control engines to keep the attitude of the whole spacecraft very stable during this re-entry burn. So it will take for about 2 or 3 minutes, and with this re-entry burn, the spacecraft will change from an orbit to a re-entry trajectory. With the re-entry trajectory, although at this moment it's still in a vacuum condition, as Professor Zhang has mentioned, but the lowest point or the perigee of the spacecraft will be in the atmosphere. So this is a key step for return home.
All right. So before their return journey to Earth, Professor Zhang, what were some of the necessary steps to make sure that the capsule was ready to go?
Right. They would need to transfer all of the experimental samples that they're taking down with them onto the Shenzhou
And some,
craft.
excuse me, some live images from the ground where we could see infrared camera capturing images of helicopters for search and rescue. They are on their way and they're all ready for the return of our astronauts. Professor Zhang, yes.
Right. So the samples, and then they'll do some checkup on the air tightness of the connection between the Tiangong station and their craft, and get familiarized with all the procedures again, and basically just be cautious.
So at this stage, are the astronauts quickly entering the blackout zone? How long is it? How far is it away?
It still needs at least about half an hour. You see, at this moment, they are still, as I mentioned, they are still at a very high altitude, about more than 300 kilometers high. So the blackout area happens below the common line. It's below the 100 kilometers, so it needs a very long, what we call a coasting phase. Great. So they're already in the re-entry trajectory.
And we are still following the communication between the ground control center and the astronauts in the return capsule.
At this moment, the re-entry trajectory has already been established. So one critical step at this moment is to have all kinds of measures to determine how accurate the re-entry burn is, and to have the first forecast of the landing point.
And as our reporter, Zheng Yibing, he was at the control center, he mentioned that all systems were ready for the search and rescue operation. Hopefully in about 2 hours' time, our astronauts will be back in the designated spots in Inner Mongolia, the landing site. And the ground staff in charge of a search and operation have gone through different exercises and drills to make sure that their operation will be spot on to receive and retrieve the return capsule and our astronauts in a timely and safely manner.
On the left of the screen, you can see, as you mentioned, is what you mentioned, the infrared camera, the video from the recovery system. Actually speaking, the recovery system is also a very big system in our whole manned space program. This time we use 5 helicopters and more than 100 ground vehicles to welcome our heroes home.
Sure. Professor Zhang, let me ask you this. What kind of preparations have been made for SHENZHOU-18's return here on Earth?
I think the most significant one is just right 24 hours before this return, they did a full dress rehearsal. So down to essentially just since the actual craft itself, everything is down to the minute details. And then obviously the helicopters, they've been waiting in there. They mentioned that if the temperature drops below 0, they're going to turn on the engines every hour just to make sure everything is in a ship shape. It doesn't actually freeze over. And also because it's night and it's a dark night. It's at the beginning of the month for lunar sort of Chinese calendar, which means the moon is just a silver sliver. So they installed extra sort of infrared pods on the helicopters. They have searchlights. They have night vision goggles. So all the bells and whistles for looking for this thing in a very dark desert.
Yeah. So the moon is not so bright at this time of the month. Are other weather conditions cooperating this time?
At least from the view, as you mentioned, from this infrared camera, we can see that the landing site is in good condition. But honestly speaking, you know that it's located in the Batan Jilin Desert near all the Gobi Desert.
Yeah.
So the natural condition is not very good, not very friendly. So there are frequently have the sandstorms, and also it's actually speaking is already very cold at this moment. So a little bit tough for the ground team.
Sure. For every manned mission, every launch and homecoming is so breathtaking. Every one of us, people from China, from home and abroad, are closely watching every development, every step of the way. And as we mentioned earlier, the 3 astronauts, their names are Commander Ye Guangfu and also Li Guangxu and Li Chong.
Yes.
They've conducted
I just
2
heard the voice
spacewalks
of
in
Mr. Ye
space.
Guangfu. He reported he's feeling good.
Right. It's very important to update the ground control with their physical conditions.
It's very interesting that Mr. Ye Guangfu is sitting in the middle. You know that Mr. Ye Guangfu can speak very fluent English, and he was trained in Europe in the cave training several years before. So he has many friends in European countries.
And hopefully someday he will be sharing with
Exactly,
CGTN his
yeah.
experiences up in space. And again, we're watching the return journey of the SHENZHOU-18 mission. It was launched in April 25th to be exact this year. And the crew spent a little more than 6 months up in space, operating the Tiangong space station, conducting experiments and spacewalks, and having this official handover with the SHENZHOU-19 crew who arrived at the Tiangong space station just a few days ago.
Yeah. So you can see on the right of the screen is the camera mounted in the re-entry capsule, and this is a camera mounted outside the spacecraft. So at this moment, we still have the communication link with the Tianlian data relay satellite. So we can have a very high data rate to support us to transfer the video streams. Actually speaking, more than 2 video streams, one from the inside and one from the outside. But as Professor Zhang has already mentioned, if we enter the blackout area, the communication will be interrupted. So at that moment, several minutes later, the whole communication, either those from the Tianlian data relay satellite or from the ground stations, will be cut off because of the. We've heard the forecast of the prediction of this landing site, landing point.
Very precise location of the expected landing spot.
Yeah, this is the first one, the first prediction. But we will have 4 predictions because you know that every time it will be more accurate. We have a theoretical landing point. As we mentioned, but you know that every time, because of the error of the control system and also because of the influence of the wind and other factors, so every time is different from the theoretical one. So we need the prediction, and each time is more closer to the real one, and we can forward this message to the ground team, and they will move to the newly updated predictions, either the helicopters and the ground vehicles. All have this, utilize this prediction.
Professor Zhang, what do you consider to be the most critical point of this entire landing process?
I think it's actually opening the parachute. The blackout is intense, but you know it's aerodynamically stable configuration. Nothing really can go wrong, in my opinion. The most difficult part is opening the parachute, which is it's 3 basketball-sized parachutes packed into like 200 liters, really tiny little thing, and just imagine unfolding that correctly without anything tangled up. And also the weather condition is important. If there's a lot of wind blowing, then the whole thing will be like a swing, and astronauts wouldn't be very comfortable inside. And once that land, if the parachute isn't cut off really quickly, then the whole huge parachute will drag you across the desert. Just imagine sitting in a metal container being dragged around in the rugged terrain. It's not going to be comfortable at all.
There's so many uncertainties there.
Yeah.
What kind of scenarios or sensations, Professor Yang, do the astronauts experience during this re-entry process. I mean, this is beyond the comprehension of us ordinary people. Even for trained astronauts, they still experience some very uncomfortable moments.
Exactly, but you see that on the left of the screen is 3 astronauts, and also we can see the camera mounted on outside the capsule. But you know that at this moment they are still in the zero-G environment, so very comfortable. I believe that after about 10 minutes, they will have another critical point of the separation between the propulsion module and the re-entry capsule. After that, and for several minutes, the re-entry capsule will touch the upper edge of the atmosphere. So at that moment, they will feel the G forces, and it becomes bigger and bigger, and the peak value will be about 3.6, which means that 3.6 heavier than their own mass. And moreover, as you mentioned, they will also experience a very intensive vibration. So both they will feel the G forces much heavier than their own body, and also the vibration. So it's really not very comfortable. But as you mentioned, they will be well trained on the ground before their flight mission, especially Mr. Ye Guangfu. You know that this is the second time for Mr. Ye Guangfu to experience that. So he has been used to it, and he will not be very nervous.
Yeah. Well, as we wait for their return, let's also look at an earlier story. The SHENZHOU-18 is set to return to Earth on Monday, and alongside its 3 Taikonauts, the spacecraft will also bring home scientific materials from the National Space Lab. Our reporter Sun Ye has the details for us.
When the SHENZHOU-18 crew returns after about 6 months aboard China's space station, they will also bring back scientific materials from the National Space Lab that may help unlock answers to significant scientific questions.
The samples returning with the SHENZHOU-18 mission include 5 types of life science specimens and over 20 samples from material science projects. Among them, more than a dozen were exposed to the external environment outside the space station to observe their reactions under such conditions. Additionally, samples from the container-free material cabinet and high-temperature material cabinet would also be brought back. These will undergo thorough research and analysis on the ground.
The first ever fish tank ecosystem experiment on the China space station was conducted during the SHENZHOU-18 mission, featuring an ecosystem of 4 zebrafish and homeward plants.
The zebrafish thrived for over 40 days, during which we observed unique movement patterns in microgravity. For instance, they sometimes swarm belly up, displaying behaviors not seen on Earth. Interestingly, the small ecosystem established itself more quickly in space than it typically would on the ground. By uncovering these foundational insights, we're setting the stage for future studies on more complex ecosystems.
Scientists say China's space station has become an ideal place to uncover the basic laws of matter movement and life activities.
In space-based biological and physical sciences, the goal is to explore the fundamental laws governing matter and life under extreme conditions. Our space station has conducted extensive research across various areas. For example, we're examining the biological effects of space on living organisms, studying impacts at the molecular, cellular, tissue, and organ levels, right up to entire organisms and groups. How are they influenced by microgravity and radiation? What countermeasures can mitigate these effects? These studies provide essential insights into the basic principles of life and its adaptation.
The SHENZHOU-18 crew conducted some 90 experiments and tests across fields such as microgravity physics, space material science, space life sciences, space medicine, and space technology. 深夜 CGTN 酒泉甘肃 Province.
Well, gentlemen, this is quite unusual for us to be, playing the stories, and at the same time, we're also watching live signal from inside the return capsule of the SHENZHOU-18 mission, where we could see 3 astronauts are getting ready for their return to Earth. Certainly a very exciting moment, but a lot of people are waiting anxiously whether everything will go well for this final step of this mission.
Exactly. So at this moment, there are two modules, the re-entry capsule and the propulsion module, still waiting for the separation. So at this moment, the attitude control of the spacecraft still is charged by the propulsion module. At this moment, you can see that the three astronauts are in very good status, and also they are reading the manual, because you know that the manual, the content of the manual, not including those of the normal operations step by step, but also include those of the abnormal cases. So
the emergency.
They have to be aware what they should do and what they should not do in the emergency case. So this is also very, very important. And on the left of the screen, you can see also, as you mentioned, the infrared camera on the ground, in the ground recovery system. So it's a little bit cold in the Dongfeng landing site at this moment in the very dark night, but still very, you know that everyone is very enthusiastic to welcome our heroes home. And also the helicopters, as reported by Mr. Zheng Yibing and Ms. Sun Ye, they just had the drill several days before, so everything goes okay. Not only the helicopters, but also the ground vehicles.
Sure. Well, if you've just joined us, this is our special live broadcast of the return journey of the SHENZHOU-18 mission. And right now it's just past midnight. It's early morning here in Beijing, and in about less than 2 hours, hopefully, we'll be seeing the touchdown of the return capsule of the SHENZHOU-18 spacecraft.
I believe within 4 minutes, there will be another critical step, is the separation between the propulsion module and the re-entry capsule. You know that on the ground, just along the trail of the spacecraft, you can see a very beautiful scene. There is a very high spot when it enters the atmosphere is the re-entry capsule, a very bright and very big spot. And also it has a very beautiful trail. The trail is the debris of the propulsion module, because you know that it do not have a heat protection system. When enters the atmosphere, it will be broken into pieces and burn in the atmosphere. So you can see it forms like the meteor shower, a beautiful trail. So this is a very interesting thing which can be seen by all the ground stations along the trajectory of the Shenzhou spacecraft.
Beautiful view from space. And Professor Zhang, we know that this is SHENZHOU-18, I mean, is the 13th manned Chinese spacecraft and the 7th flight to the Tiangong space station, but the 3rd manned mission to the China space station. Is that correct?
No, it's the 3rd mission into the application and development phase of the Tiangong station. That's after the construction. SHENZHOU-14 was the crew that actually put the station, the 3 modules together. So at that stage, it's pretty much fixed for the foreseeable future. There is the potential for extending it further, but I think they have lunar landing occupying them for the before 2030. So the Tiangong expansion plan may be pushed back a little bit.
Sure. How has the SHENZHOU-18 mission built on the previous achievements of earlier missions?
Well, you know that this, as Professor Zhang has already mentioned, this is in the application and development phase. So the major task in this phase is conducting all kinds of scientific research. So it is very complex or difficult to describe which one is more important, but all kinds of very complicated scientific research in orbit. But very interesting, Professor Zhang has already mentioned, is that the potential lunar missions within several years. You know that Mr. Cai Xizhe, the commander of the SHENZHOU-19 mission, also his pressed wish his wish to the media formally that he want to walk on the moon. And more interesting is that I suggested to my Taikonaut friend to eat mooncake on the moon.
I'm sure so many astronauts would share the aspiration to finally set their foot on the moon, and this right now is something in the making. This is a very ambitious plan. China aims to land its astronauts on the moon by 2030. Professor Zhang, we know that you are involved in some of the projects, hopefully in the future construction of the lunar research station. Can you share with us some of the progress going on?
Right. Well, I'm one of the astronomers. There are a whole bunch of us putting in proposals for what science we can do at the research station. Essentially, what's going to happen is that before 2030, there will be human being sent to the moon. But even before that, there will be Chang'e 7 and Chang'e 8 going there. Chang'e 7 probably going there in 2026. That mission is mostly there to look for water. So they will look for it from the orbit, and they will have flyover capabilities, sort of small jumper sort of rockets going around and look for water in the deep craters where the sun never get to,
from the far side of the
from the near side. The whole
near side.
The station will be on the near side, near the South Pole, and then the Chang'e 8 will try to do some. It's not completely fixed, all the missions on Chang'e 8, but it would likely to do some in situ resource utilization experimentation, and then possibly two more sort of technology demonstration missions. There.
More communication.
Okay, the helicopters have reached their position.
Right.
Yes. So once the astronauts get there, they will actually have something to use. All of the other probes would already have brought useful stuff for them to be able to move around, for example, on the moon. And then before 2035, there will be the basic shape of the lunar research station, which basically consists of the whatever these 4 missions can bring up there. And then after 2035, it's all up in the air. So that's where we're putting in the proposals for more extended of this system.
And now this is also an important step.
From the commander, we heard that the propulsion module and the re-entry capsule has already been successfully separated. So this is another great step.
So when we were talking about all these lunar missions in the future, all the way up to 2035, there was another set of missions going on Mars. The Tianwen, for example, it also aims to retrieve some samples from Mars.
Yes.
Around the same time that China aims to land humans on the moon.
Exactly. So Professor Zhang has already mentioned a very important step of the establishment of our first robotic base on the lunar surface. But it is very interesting. Also, there is a very interesting related issue that this time during the SHENZHOU-19 mission, they will transfer some bricks from the inside station to the outside. These bricks were made by the regolith, which simulate the features of the lunar regolith. So this is a good preparation for in the future, as Professor Zhang has already mentioned, the on-site resource utilization. We can use the regolith on the lunar surface to make the brick. So this time we will test it in our Tiangong space station because it's also in the vacuum condition and also have extremely high and low temperatures. So this is a very good or ideal environment to test the simulated bricks first.
Well, Professor Zhang, it could get really technical. I want to ask more about your project, the design and the philosophy of the project. What do you hope to achieve?
So there's an international push. to use the moon as a detector for gravitational waves. So when the waves come through, it stretches the space and time, so it will stretch the moon. The moon will start ringing. If you put seismometers on the moon, strategically located, if they're sensitive enough, you might be able to detect certain gravitational waves. So internationally, the Europeans have this lunar LGWA project, lunar gravitational wave antenna project. We are putting in a proposal for a simplified version of that. So theirs is more sensitive but more difficult to achieve. So there's a global, not just for us, there's an international push. The scientific community is working together to make the moon into something that we can actually benefit from, not just going there, use it for something. Yeah.
And if we look at things from a holistic perspective, how does the Shenzhou missions pave the way for China's other space ambition, for example, landing humans on the moon?
Well, one moment. Just now, we just heard the voice that our Kashi ground station has already captured our SHENZHOU-18 spacecraft. You know that Kashi space station is in Xinjiang Autonomous Region. It is in the most west part of the Xinjiang Autonomous Region. So although at this moment, the SHENZHOU spacecraft is still outside China, but already our ground stations in China has already captured it. So this is a very good moment for them to return home.
They're just getting near.
Yeah, exactly. So for your question, okay, there will be the second prediction of the landing point.
And as you said, as the return capsule gets nearer to
already close to our China's territory.
The prediction of the location will just get more precise.
So soon the spacecraft will enter the blackout area. So the communication between the ground stations and the spacecraft will be interrupted.
How long could it last?
You can see that our ground station has already captured optical images of the re-entry capsule. You can see on the front is the big spot is our re-entry capsule, and you can see the beautiful trail, as I mentioned, is the debris of the propulsion module. Very beautiful.
This blackout zone that we mentioned, and our astronauts will be entering in just a moment. How long could it last?
It usually lasts about 4 to 5 minutes.
And with no communication.
Yes.
Between the crew and the ground staff, it could be some anxious waiting time. But as Professor Zhang mentioned just now, it's protocol. It's something that
it's natural.
Each landing will go through.
So at this moment, as you asked, the spacecraft, inside the spacecraft, the 3 Taikonauts are experiencing the very intensive G-forces and very intensive vibration. Not very comfortable because of the aerodynamic drags and also the aerodynamic forces acting on the fuselage of the re-entry capsule. So this is the most inconvenient phase of the astronauts, but after the deployment of the main parachute, it will be very safe.
But this mission also marks a little more than 2 decades of China's manned mission to space. Remember, Shenzhou-5 mission, Mr. Yang Liwei was China's first astronaut, the lone astronaut into space 21 years ago.
Exactly.
So over the years, there has been some technical adjustments and improvements to improve the astronauts' sensations during this blackout period.
Yes, they've been more comfortable than the Yang Liwei's maiden flight to outer space. You know, at that moment, we don't have much experience, and also our launch sequence, especially the control system, need to be optimized. So, actually speaking, Mr. Yang Liwei also mentioned that, especially during the ascent phase, during the launch, he feels extremely inconvenient because of the G-forces and the vibration.
More movements on the ground from Inner Mongolia, the vast, sparsely populated Gobi Desert. The motorcade is on the go to approach the designated landing site. Helicopters As we saw earlier, were also deployed to receive the astronauts.
So Shangcheng is a ground station near our Jiuquan Satellite Launch Center. So this means that the ground station in near Jiuquan Satellite Launch Center has already get this video of the spacecraft. So it's very, very close to its home.
And Professor Zhang, I'm sure there have been some elements of international collaboration in every Shenzhou mission and in China's future space missions. Tell us about that, please.
Right. So China's international collaboration is done in a very open way. It's open solicitation across the world. It's not like through private channels, just talking to a few like space powers. So, for example, the experiments on the space station. It's solicited through the United Nations Office of Outer Space Affairs. So any country can put in proposals and they will be evaluated by a panel on scientific merit. And then China will shoulder the up and down going costs and the other party would do the experiment. And also for the International Lunar Research Station, it's openly put out in wide open conferences that there are 8 different levels of collaboration, down to the simple sort of education, all the way up to mission, even concept, the entire station concept design. Depending on your level of expertise and commitment, each country, especially developing countries, trying to get on the game. As I said earlier, we're beginning to reap benefits from space exploration. So to be egalitarian, so everybody can benefit. It's good. They have a entry point along the whole chain and climb up.
Sure. And Professor Yang, I could see you agreeing with what Professor Zhang was saying, and you just came back from a major space conference.
Exactly.
Any word on international collaboration in terms of space missions?
Well, you know that just during the Chang'e 6 mission, we have a laser ranging retro reflector made by Italy, and you know that I just came back from Milano of the International Astronautical Congress, and you know that I met Miss Samantha Cristoforetti, the Italian female astronaut. You know that she was trained together with Mr. Ye Guangfu, the commander of this mission, before, either during the cave training in Europe and also in the rescue training in Yantai, in the Yellow Sea of China. It's very interesting that Miss Samantha can speak Chinese very fluently, and she has a Chinese name called Shasha, and also that she gave me a signature with both Italian and Chinese. So I hope in the future, we do hope that some European astronauts have the chance to visit our Tiangong space station. And also, as Professor Zhang has already mentioned, we've already have very good cooperations with the European countries in our Chang'e lunar probes, either on the lander or on the orbiter. So in the future, we hope that we can have deeper and wider cooperation in the scientific research.
Well, if you've just joined us, this is our special live coverage of the return journey, the landing process of the SHENZHOU-18 mission. 3 Chinese astronauts spent a little more than 6 months on the Tiangong space station.
So
right now, they're making their way back to
home.
You
can see the very bright spot in the re-entry capsule.
Right.
At this moment, the debris of the propulsion module has already burned out. And you can see that at this moment, I believe it's already go out of the blackout area. And I believe that the communication between the spacecraft and the ground station will be re-established.
And 2024 is an important year for China's space missions. For example, later this month, we'll be seeing the Tianzhou-8 cargo ship making its way to the Tiangong space station, providing supplies, vital supplies to the crew up there.
So every time that the manual for the food of each astronaut is customized based province. So you know that, for instance, for Mr. Ye Guangfu, because he's come from Sichuan province, so many
the parachute. Now this is the opening of the parachute, as Professor Jiang Fan mentioned just now, a very critical step of this entire landing mission. It looks like all is going well.
Yeah.
So I believe at this moment, the altitude of the re-entry capsule is already below 10 kilometers. So the main parachute has already been successfully deployed, and the astronaut is already very safe at this moment.
And communication has been re-established, and we are listening to the conversation between the crew and the ground control.
Yeah. And the next critical step will be the ejection of the main heating shield at the bottom.
And the third prediction of the landing spot.
Generally, we will have 4 predictions. Each one will be better.
And we are holding our breaths, even though we've been watching this all together for many times in the past. But as I said, every manned mission, every space mission that carries the aspiration of so many people is something exciting.
As Professor Zhang has already mentioned, the wind speed is a very considerable factor for our prediction of very precise enough to ensure that our ground team and helicopter can reach the landing point.
Professor Yang, why don't we get the latest from our reporter Zheng Yibing, who's joining us live now from the Beijing Aerospace Control Center. Well, Yibing, we're approaching the final moment of the landing. Tell us what you were hearing there.
Well, yes, Mama, we're about to witness the historic moment of touchdown of the SHENZHOU-18 manned spacecraft at the Dongfeng landing site. From the big screen behind me, we can see the whole process from the SHENZHOU-18 spacecraft entering the atmosphere, and also to the opening of the parachute and to the later touchdown moment. So this whole process we have been covering at the current time. So the helicopters, just like you said in your studio, are approaching because the third forecast of the landing spot has just been announced. So the helicopters of the air detachment of the rescue and search team are flying close to the landing spot. So later they will get to the landing spot and see the return capsule at the first hand, and also the vehicles on the ground are driving towards that forecasted landing spot. Well, this is 6th time I've been covering the return of the Chinese astronaut from the China space station to Earth. Well, I remember my first time I'm covering the news. So here it is about the back in the April 2022. Well, at that time, the Commander Ye Guangfu was the member of the SHENZHOU-13 crew, and now he has become the commander of the SHENZHOU-18 crew, and he has just with other crew members of Li Guangsu and Li Cong, they are just returning from the China space station and heading towards the Dongfeng landing site. So that's the current situation. We'll brief you on what's happening here in the latest about this crew. Back to you.
Thank you so much, Yibing, for that update. And as you mentioned, and as Professor Yang mentioned, Mr. Ye Guangfu, the commander of the SHENZHOU-18 mission, is bringing home with him a career milestone. He has become, in fact, the first Chinese astronaut who has spent more than a year in space.
More than a year, yeah.
Right? Isn't that remarkable?
So I believe that at this moment, the main heating shield has already been successfully ejected. Okay, and also there are also several critical steps. So sooner or later you will see some. Maybe this is at night, so maybe you can see the white smoke released from the capsule. That is the release of the remaining propellants. Actually speaking, hydrogen, because it is toxic. So we need to release that to ensure the safety of the ground staff. And also, you know that just before landing, we will change the direction of the ropes on the parachute from a leading one to a perpendicular one. So this is also preparation for the landing. And another critical step is to raise the seats of the astronaut to have energy or impact dumpling for the touchdown. The final step, just 1 or 2 meters above the ground, we will ignite the retro rocket, the 4 very small solid motors, to continue to reduce the speed of the capsule to about 1 to 2 meters per second. So that will be very comfortable for the astronauts.
The cushioning effect.
Yeah.
Professor Zhang, you mentioned the size of the parachute earlier. You said this is about the size of a soccer field.
Right, just 1,200 square meters. Yeah.
Tell us about this design and what are the functions of this part.
Right, so the parachute, there's actually 3 parachutes. We probably didn't see the earlier 2. There was a very small one sort of dragging everything out. And then later on you have the decelerator, sort of medium-sized parachute. And then the main one, once it's opened, it doesn't open fully right at the beginning. It sort of gradually opens up. So the whole dragged out procedure is to reduce the deceleration intensity to make it more comfortable for the astronauts, and also for the structural integrity of the parachutes themselves is beneficial. So at this stage they'll experience something like 2G or something. So that's reasonable.
And right now we could see from the screen on the right that the altitude is right now at around 3,000 meters.
Still 3,000 meters above the surface of the ground. Yeah.
Right. So the deployment of the parachute, is this considered a very important step for the success of the entire mission?
Absolutely. You know that from the view of the whole history, you know that they do have trajectory. You know that during the Soyuz 1 mission, the parachute failed to be deployed, so it hit the ground, and Mr. Komarov, the cosmonaut of former Soviet Union, died at that moment. So the deployment of the main parachute is extremely important, and that is the reason why we have a backup chute in case to avoid the dangers when the main parachute has not deployed properly.
Of course, now this return capsule is quickly descending to the Earth's surface, and the search and rescue team are standing by to locate the return capsule as it makes its touchdown.
It looks like it's not swinging too badly, so the wind condition is good.
Yeah. Although it's a little bit cold at that moment. Yeah. I believe this is also very difficult for the ground staff, but also a little bit difficult for the reporters because you know that in Jiuquan Satellite Launch Center it's already very cold.
2,003 meters above Earth's surface.
Yeah.
And you mentioned the reporters. We do have a team of reporters. Chinês, she's there monitoring the movement there, and hopefully later on after the touchdown we could talk to her about what she's seeing and feeling there in the landing site.
It seems that we heard the voice of the astronauts.
And hearing their clear sound is a sign that their physical conditions.
Yeah. Several minutes later will be the critical step for Mr. Li Cong, because he will in charge of the button to cut off the parachute. Honestly speaking, it is we can seldom see that the spacecraft will land vertically. Only this happens in the SHENZHOU-18 mission, just by Mr. Ye Guangfu, and also in SHENZHOU-6 mission. But in SHENZHOU-13 mission, this was charged by Ms. Wang Yaping, and because she just pressed the button at the most precise time, so the spacecraft landed vertically. You know that landing vertically is very comfortable for the astronauts,
right.
But in most cases it will lie down.
We'll see what happens this time. So, of course, our astronauts have undergone intense training, and right now we are seeing younger generations of astronauts being recruited and starting their training, aspiring to their space dreams. And talking about that, we have a very young team of astronauts, the SHENZHOU-19 mission up there in the Tiangong space station. What are some of their priority job?
Well, you know that, as you mentioned, the crew of the two of the crew of the SHENZHOU-19 were born after 1990, and also you know that Mr. Li Cong in this mission was born in 1989, also very young. I personally speaking, I think this is a good preparation for our future manned mission to the moon. As mentioned by our space hero Yang Liwei just several months before, that all the astronauts preparing for the human missions to the moon will first they must have the experience to stay in our Tiangong space station. So you see that today our Tiangong space station is not the national lab for our space science, but also you know that it is a good training base for our future lunar missions.
Absolutely. And right now, the return module is less than 1,000 meters above the Earth's surface. Our astronauts will soon make their landing back home.
You know that just at the bottom of the capsule, we have a gamma ray altimeter. It emits gamma ray radiation to the ground, and with the reflection, we can measure a precise distance between the bottom and the ground. So just at 1 or 2 meters, it will trigger the retro rocket, the 4 small solid rocket motors, and it will continuously, you know, at this moment still the speed, the descending speed is about 6 to 10 meters per second. So still very high. If you directly touch down, it will be a great impact. So with the help of the retro rocket, it will landing very softly, very gently.
Sure, and we could see from the picture that the wind condition is cooperating. It's pretty stable right now.
Pretty stable.
And as we talked about preparations for search and rescue missions, there's helicopters, a team of helicopters, as well as the motorcade. How do the aerial and ground search and rescue operation cooperate to locate our astronauts?
Because of the forecast and the fact that there is actually BEIDO's navigation signals being broadcast, they know exactly where it's going to land, and also the helicopters can see this thing, and they will close in after the heat shield get ejected, so they don't get hit by it. So as soon as this capsule touches down, the helicopter will be there within minutes. So it's almost instantaneous, and then the ground.
We've got another moving object near this return module. Is that one of the helicopters?
Exactly. That must be one of the 5 helicopters.
Sure.
Yeah. So we just heard the voice of the commander of the re-entry mission that the fourth prediction of the landing point has already been announced. So the commander needs to confirm with every team, including the helicopters and the ground teams.
Absolutely.
So this is a video taken from one of the helicopter. We have 5 helicopters. One act as commander, one act as touchdown.
Touchdown.
Yeah.
Welcome home, astronauts.
Yeah. So you can see the smoke is the ignition of the retro rocket.
Live signal now from the landing site where China's SHENZHOU-18 mission, the return capsule carrying 3 astronauts, landed safely at the designated landing site in Inner Mongolia Autonomous Region, and now it's up to the ground search and rescue team to find our astronauts and open up the capsule.
Well, we can check whether it is vertical or not.
Yeah, that might look. It looks like it's upright, so good job.
It looks like an upright position. Great job.
Bragging right for him.
The weather there is pretty ideal for the landing, even though the moonlight is not that so bright. But then our rescue teams are making it up.
So this is a video taken by a camera mounted on the helicopter or the ground vehicle of the recovery team. So this is an infrared video stream. You can see that at this moment still the re-entry capsule is still in a very high temperature because of the friction
That's right.
with the atmosphere. So it's very hot.
And now the motorcade on their way. It seems that this landing process,
Goes very smoothly.
it's so smooth that it took shorter time than we had anticipated.
Well, you know that still we need several minutes for the ground team to reach this point. Although you know that every time there is almost no exception that the helicopters will reach that first. But you know that the terrain of the landing zone, the Dongfeng landing site, is still very complex. So a little bit challenging for the helicopters to land down. So the commander helicopter will land first, and then the other four.
We hope they're safe and sound inside the capsule. We still await to see some images coming out from the return
东风，
module.
我是北京。北京第4次落点预报已发出，后续由东风
and
按
this
计
is
划
the
实施搜
fourth
救回收工
and the
作。
final report on the landing spot. Now, what is the critical step now? What is the priority before our astronauts step out of the return capsule?
Well, there are several critical steps. One is that, as I mentioned, we have an instrument to measure the distance between the bottom and the surface called gamma ray altimeter. So we have lead box to cover this instrument to block the radiation, the dangerous radiation, to protect the ground staff and the astronauts. And also, we have the ground staff who comes from the design of the propulsion set, because you know that we use hydrogen. It's toxic. So we need the ground staff to check if there is any leakage of the toxic hydrogen to also ensure the safety. Moreover, we need the medics. When our ground staff open the hatch, there is only one hatch on the re-entry capsule. We need to check the inner atmosphere inside the capsule, and also check the physical condition, physical status of the 3 crew members.
Absolutely. And hopefully we can get some visuals soon of our astronauts.
Looks like it's tipped over, but the parachute has been cut, so that's good. Otherwise, somebody from the helicopter would jump in and cut the parachutes for them.
So again, this is the return capsule of the SHENZHOU-18 mission. 3 Chinese astronauts are inside, and we're waiting for the search and rescue team to find the return capsule and open up the hatch. The 3 astronauts spent a little more than 6 months on the Tiangong space station, and they handed over the operation and their job to the SHENZHOU-19 crew, who are still operating the CSS.
So at this moment, we can see that still the re-entry capsule is still in a very high temperature because of the friction between its surface with the atmosphere during the re-entry.
Right. And infrared images of one object approaching
The ground vehicle
spot in the center.
approaching the bright spot in the re-entry capsule. So this must be a video from one of the helicopters.
One of the helicopters. Do we usually get visuals or audios from our astronauts at this stage, or are they kind of still in a recovering
Honestly
stage?
speaking, usually we've already established a communication link between the ground station and our crew members. So you can hear the voice from the Mr. Ye Guangfu or Li Cong and Li Guangsu. You can see the dust raised by the helicopters.
Right.
Yes.
Now,
Okay.
some movements of our rescuers, the medics probably.
Yeah.
They are usually the first ones to approach the capsule. And right now it's early morning, Monday, Beijing time, and that's exactly the time in the landing site in Inner Mongolia Autonomous Region, the vast and sparsely populated Gobi Desert in northwest China. The commander of this mission, Mr. Ye Guangfu, is the first Chinese astronaut who spent cumulatively over a year in space. And this is
Dongfeng is the name of Jiutian Satellite Launch Center, who are in charge of the whole recovery procedure. It just reported that the main parachute has already been cut off.
right.
So there will be no influence of the strong wind, which will cause any dangerous situation because of the parachute.
And we also talked about how significant this mission is in terms of it marks 2 decades, a little more than 2 decades of China's
21
manned
years.
Space mission. And just imagine what a long way China has come. Generations of scientists, engineers, and astronauts.
Okay, our helicopters had just reported that we already have one of them landed near the capsule.
Sure.
So we have one helicopter act as commander, one in charge of the communication, and the other 3 are related to medics. One is in charge of monitoring the health conditions of all 3 crew members, and the other 2 are in charge of the rescue in necessary steps.
Now, as we were watching the landing process, it seems that the return capsule made an upright landing and somehow it tipped over moments later. What is the ideal position for the astronauts to, get out of the capsule in the fastest and the safest way?
Well, that the design of the Shenzhou spacecraft is very interesting. You know that it adopted what we call a semi-ballistic re-entry. So the center of its mass is not in the symmetrical axis of this capsule. So because of this deviation, usually it will not land vertically. So like this time. So usually it's difficult for the astronauts to usually it feel not very comfortable at this moment. Only exception is the Shenzhou 6 mission and the Shenzhou 13 mission because Mr. Nie Haisheng and Ms. Wang Yaping cut the parachute at the most precise moment, so the capsule land vertically, and the 3 astronauts just like lying down and feel very comfortable. Although it's honestly speaking, it's difficult for them to go out, but with the ground team, it's not a problem.
And now on the left side of the screen, this is some real-time live picture of the return capsule. And earlier on, we were watching infrared pictures.
We can also see the beacons, the flashlights, the beacons. So that is also the necessary signal for the rescue team. And also we have the radio wave in a very standard frequency to broadcast the position and the status of the capsule to possible rescue teams. If anything wrong happened, if the capsule landed in other countries or in the oceans, these signals are very important to help the rescue team to reach their point as soon as possible.
And Professor Zhang, the astronauts have lived in orbit under prolonged microgravity conditions for 6 months. Has this affected them physically?
Quite a bit. So their muscle doesn't really need to work that hard, and some of the smaller muscle group doesn't need to be used at all almost. So they will be feeling the burns from those muscle groups in the near future, and also muscle atrophy. Just from the lack of use, including the heart muscle in particular. So which is why they exercise vigorously up there to try to maintain a sense of fitness. And also your bone loses its mass. I think it's 1 to 2% every month or something. So the human body is really economic, and if it feels that you don't need it, it just goes away. And then which is why once they come back, they're gonna need 6 months to basically recover from all of this, and there's also the radiation effect as well.
Sure.
Right.
And you know, when they return to Earth, they've also encountered this G forces stronger than in space. How long does it take for them to really readapt to Earth's environment?
They will be feeling really dizzy, I would imagine, because well, might not be the only reason I work, but you keep your balance because there's some fluids in your ears and stuff. When you're in zero gravity, you don't have that. Once you get used to that and all of that suddenly turned on, you'll be feeling a bit nauseated, which is why, you know, when you're in parachute condition, the parachute, if it swings widely, then it will be pretty bad for you. And also because your heart isn't pumping things up as much in space, it's good for them. So you will see that they would be in a lying down position all the way through. They never sort of stand up. Otherwise, they're going to be dizzy because the blood doesn't go up against gravity.
What kind of measures are needed to ensure the Taikonauts' health after being in space for a prolonged period? This time, say 6 months.
So immediately the medical staff, which is the ones wearing blue and white, one of them will go in, will ask questions. So usually he would be one that works very closely with the astronauts during training. So he would gauge their response quite accurately.
We're witnessing this exciting moment where ground staff are trying to open the hatch.
You may notice that the ground staff wear different, wear their suit in different colors. So some belongs to the astronaut system. The astronaut system is in charge of the health condition of the astronauts. And also we have some staff from the Shenzhou spaceship system. So they will be in charge of opening the hatch because they are more familiar with the spacecraft itself. So they belong to the different teams, but this time all serve for the recovery system.
As for the training, the commander of this mission, Mr. Ye Guangfu, he's been there twice, and he's not the only astronaut who's been there more than once. So after their journey to space, when they come back to Earth, they still need to undergo vigorous training. Is that correct?
It's correct. And also there are, actually speaking, there are 3 phases for their readaptation to the Earth's environment. The first 1 or 2 weeks, they will lie in bed for ensure their safety, because their bones and the muscles are all very remarkably weakened. And the second phase will be the major recovery, and they will do exercise more and more. And finally, in the third phase, they will completely recover and return to their daily training.
Sure.
So you can see, probably they are prepared to open the hatch.
If you've just joined us, this is our special live coverage of the process where ground staff is trying to receive and welcome back the 3 astronauts in China's SHENZHOU-18 mission. It's early morning in Beijing and also at the landing site in Inner Mongolia in northwest China.
Right, so one of the doctors has already entered.
So the hatch has been opened.
Yeah.
And
It's really small.
One of the medics has entered the capsule, and they're examining the physical conditions of our astronauts.
Just at this moment, there is a very important phase. It's called the readaptation of the gravity environment. So usually it depends on the different persons have different reactions. So some of them can readapt very rapidly, but some cannot. So this is not because they do not have sufficient training or not. This is just depends on their own physical conditions, or even because of their own gene. So it's quite different, but still, for generally speaking, for most of the crew, they do need this period.
And what kinds of checks do the medics need to perform on the Taikonauts? What is the procedure, Professor Zhang?
So questioning them first, they know their bodies pretty well, and then some blood pressure, some very simple tests will be done right now, and then I think he'll be handing them some fluids with electrolytes to just because they've been up there for a long period of time, also because the gravity is redistributing their fluids, so they might top up. And then once that's done, they will be transferred to, we saw just earlier, the ground teams, the motorcade has just arrived. Some of the large vehicles in there would contain facilities where they can do more thorough sort of medical checkups.
Sure. I wonder if the families of our astronauts are also there to welcome them back. We do not know.
They will
if
conduct the medical checking of the health condition of the astronaut. And very extremely interesting thing, you know that the SHENZHOU-13 crew mentioned that the most favorite place they want to stay is in the kitchen or in the bathroom, because they can see the water falling down.
At the space station?
No. After they came back home.
After they come back home. Yeah. So it takes them a lot of effort and time to really readjust to Earth's environment. So again, the three Taikonauts of the SHENZHOU-18 mission are Ye Guangfu, the commander, Li Cong, and Li Guangsu.
So
the commander, Ye Guangfu, is 43 years old. And this is his second space mission. He is a former crew member of the SHENZHOU-13 mission, which lasted from October 2021 to April 2022. So that was 6 months, and the SHENZHOU-18 mission also lasted 6 months.
And the first one to go out of the capsule will be Mr. Ye Guangfu, the commander.
That's correct. And our SHENZHOU-18 crew conducted 2 spacewalks lasting quite a long time, 8.5 hours and 6.5 hours. They've also conducted more than 90 experiments in the Tiangong space station.
They've mounted some protection measures to the critical paths outside the station.
Right.
Okay. The commander is reporting the final landing spot, the real coordinate, the longitude and the latitude.
And we also want to mention the other members of the SHENZHOU-18 crew. 35-year-old Li Cong, and Li was selected to be a member of the 3rd batch of Chinese astronauts in 2020. And 26-year-old Li Guangsu was also selected as a member of the 3rd batch. He has trained for more than 3 years for the SHENZHOU-18 mission. And the 3 Taikonauts are all former fighter pilots.
So the ground team, we just heard the voice that the ground team is reporting the real longitude and the latitude of the landing spot. So this is the most accurate one.
Right. Now, for the benefit of hindsight, what are there any backup measures in case of emergencies, Professor Zhang?
Yeah, well, you heard the parachutes would have a backup parachute at earlier stages. For example, when the braking burn, the re-entry burn was happening, Professor Yang mentioned that you only really need 2 engines, but they had 4, and also there are extra fuels for the little thrusters to control the orientations and stuff of the thing. So if one burn isn't accurate enough, they potentially could do more to make sure everything is correct. And also the re-entry is not actually just like dropping a stone. It's not ballistic. Professor Yang mentioned there's an offset between the center of gravity and the aerodynamic push on the vehicle when it entered. That gives it a lift, so it's kind of like an aircraft wing a little bit. So it's actually flying. So this way, the number of G's felt by astronauts isn't too big. But if real bad emergency happens, it could just go ballistic and go in really fast. So all of those possible scenarios, each step would have a backup plan. So options are out there.
Yeah.
Mr. Nick Hague, just the commander of the International Space Station, right at this moment in International Space Station, he during the Soyuz MS-10 mission, he just experienced what Professor Zhang has mentioned, emergency escape, because during the launch, the Soyuz rocket has a malfunction and the emergency escape system was triggered and the spacecraft goes down directly. So there is very remarkable G-forces during this emergency re-entry. So Mr. Nick Hague just experienced these G-forces. And moreover, my friends Yi So-yen from the first Korean astronaut also experienced ballistic re-entry, so with higher G-forces than theoretical ones.
And these could be life and death moments.
Well, last for several minutes is really inconvenient. And moreover, you see that the role of the astronauts are different. For the pilots, they even need to conduct the right operations and do the right judgment during these G-forces up to 8.
Right now, we are awaiting the exit of our astronauts from the return module. What kind of special attention is mostly needed at this stage?
At this stage, as Professor Zhang has already mentioned, because you know that during the 6 months duration in outer space, most of their muscles, although they have exercise every day, although they have the right nutrition, but still some of the muscles were possibly weakened. So during the re-entry, as we also mentioned, there are intensive G-forces, there are intensive vibration, so it's possible they were hurt during this process. So one of the important tasks for the medic teams is that to ensure that the astronauts were not hurt. So if anything wrong happened, they must be treated properly. I can still remember, you know, that I am a native of Inner Mongolia. I am a native of Hohhot. In my home city, we have a hospital there. And you know that during the years before, the main landing site is Siswang Banner. And you know that Siswang Banner is very close to Hohhot. So we have a hospital and prepare for medical treatment of the astronauts. So for this, we even built a platform for the helicopters. So this is a backup measure, but very necessary.
Well, the return module made its landing, safe landing, about 20 minutes ago, and it undocked from the China space station, the Tiangong, about 9 hours ago. It took them 8.5 hours to make its way back to Earth. The SHENZHOU-18 crew, the trio astronauts, handed over their mission to the SHENZHOU-19 counterparts.
Well, we just heard the voice that the ground team are sampling the atmosphere inside the capsule. This is also not a very necessary step, but also very meaningful for scientific research, because you know that the influence of everything, even the surface of any objects inside the capsule, may influence the atmosphere inside. So the sampling will be very, very important, and also in the future, the scientists can analyze the atmosphere.
I'd like to know if the astronauts are bringing back with them some of the experiments from the Tiangong space station.
Right, so we mentioned the zebrafish experiment. You know, the fish begin to swim in upside down and stuff. They're not bringing the fish themselves down, but they're bringing water samples and some eggs. The zebrafish eggs are transparent, which is why they're perfectly good for looking at.
So the eggs were produced during their stay, the 6 months time?
Right, right. And also there are some lubricant experiments being put on the outside of the station, exposed to the space environment to help develop sort of a future stuff for mechanical lubricants to be used in space, so that samples will be brought down and analyzed. So that's just some of the examples. They will have more in there. So they have fridges. They can take biological samples in. So after they're out, some of the ground team, the motorcade people will go in there and carefully, mostly Chinese Academy of Sciences, Space Center people, they'll properly pack everything and send them off to the
Now, right now, we've heard communication that the physical check on the astronauts have been completed and they're safe and sound. They're all well.
I'm happy to hear that the astronauts all in good condition.
Yeah, a big sigh of relief.
Yeah. So, at least from my view, it's already a successful mission.
It is. It has been. Right. So we talked about their first steps to readjust to Earth's environment. What would a typical first meal look like for them after spending so much time in space, having the special kind of food?
Well, in China, we have a famous saying that dumplings for go out and noodles for go back home. But you know that for Mr. Ye Guangfu, I know that he's from Sichuan province, but maybe some spicy food.
Maybe some mild diet would be good for the astronauts.
Right. But something hot and right, some fluid stuff, because of the nauseating stuff, it upsets the stomach as well.
So what about the return capsule? Will there be any research conducted on it, the exterior and the interior?
Well, as Professor Zhang has already mentioned, we have all kinds of samples get back from outer space. Not what Professor Zhang has already mentioned, those for the lubrication study, but also that all kinds of material making, including those metals made all kinds of metals made in outer space, but also maybe some proteins, some crystals made in outer space. These are also very interesting. And also another interesting thing is that usually you know that in the previous missions, usually we have the first day covers, first day envelopes brought back from the outer space. I can even see that in the on the online shops.
Oh, wow.
So very, very interesting.
Yeah.
So this is these were act as a piggyback payload for the mission, but still very helpful in outreach purposes. And also that usually they will give them as gift to other countries or to the young people to attract them of the interest of the space technology. So this is also very, very, very interesting thing.
Sure. And the Chinese astronauts will rotate to keep the Tiangong space station up and running every 6 months. Later this month, in fact, we'll be seeing the launch of the Tianzhou cargo ship to bring vital supplies to our astronauts. And in the months that followed, we'll be seeing the launch of the SHENZHOU-20 mission.
Next year.
That's right.
That's with the help of what we called the regenerative life support system. So we don't need so much resupply for each mission. So today we don't need to launch a cargo spacecraft for each manned mission. We only need to launch the Tianzhou cargo spacecraft every 8 months. So the Tianzhou-8 cargo spacecraft not only provide the supplies for the SHENZHOU-19 mission, but also provide those resupplies for the SHENZHOU-20.
It's been more than 20 minutes, 25 minutes roughly, since the Astronauts made their landing, and we're still waiting for visuals of our astronauts stepping out from the return capsule.
We also heard voice that the ground teams are preparing for the seats of the astronauts. The medics are preparing the seats for the astronaut. As you mentioned, they are in the phase of adapting with the Earth's environment, so they must be cared very carefully. So always we brought them with the help of our ground team, and they always take the seat for them.
Seats and jackets, also because it is very cold at the landing site. We can see from the flags that it's a little bit windy there as well, but not so windy when they were making their touchdown.
So it's a very ideal condition for the recovery. But that we don't have any other choices because of the features of the orbital dynamics. So only in this moment we can have the return.
Right. So a lot of audience would wonder, why are we picking this time window for landing? It's in the middle of the night, it's so dark, and the search and rescue would be difficult during this time.
Right. So it really is determined by the orbital geometry of the Tiangong station. You want the station to essentially be orbiting in the same plane as the landing site. So your capsule, you just need to deorbit. It just need to come down. It doesn't need to fly all the way out to some other place in order to land at your site, because that happens. Because the Earth is rotating, you can imagine the Tiangong station as flying in a fixed plane in the sky, and then the Earth is rotating underneath it. You can imagine that every 24 hours there is once that the landing site is actually underneath the station's
The window is
plane.
quite narrow.
Right, but then that's not enough. You need the station to be just in the place where after 5 circles the capsule actually come down at the correct location. So that pushes out to good landing window for every week or every few weeks or something like that. And then if you want them to come back and not stay there stuck with another 3 people for another week or so, then they have to come back at night.
Yeah, that'd be too crowded.
Right.
So last month, in October, China unveiled a national mid and long-term development program for space science from year 2024 all the way to 2050. And SHENZHOU-19 is the first manned mission since the plan was announced. How do you think the tasks that the SHENZHOU-19 crew completed in space fit in with the bigger design of China's space program?
Because the space station itself really is the first step to everything. Because it's a science laboratory, and they're doing a lot of experiments out there. And some of the experiments, you can see they're preparing for long-term sort of future projects. For example, the zebrafish, the stem cell research that's done during the SHENZHOU-18 plans. To SHENZHOU-18 crew's stay to study how you can design. They're preparing the vehicles to take these astronauts to do the medical exams.
They're desanitizing
because they need a quarantine procedure. Because that, as we've already discussed, their immune system become weaker because of the long-term stay in outer space. So they need to stay in a relative clean environment. So that is the reason they need a quarantine procedure, as I mentioned, for several weeks. So they need to clean the vehicle first.
Right. So, Professor Yang, you attended the 2024 International Astronautical Congress last month in Milan.
Yeah.
And the theme of this year's Congress was responsible space activities for sustainable development. Tell us more about that, and what is China's role in ensuring the sustainability and responsibility of the joint exploration of space?
Well, of course, sustainability is a common recognition of the space community. So, to be a country, space capable nation in space field, we put it in a very high priority for the sustainability. For instance, for every of our carrier rocket, usually we just after the launch, we just release all the propellants and also discharge its battery to avoid the broken of the end stage of the rocket, to avoid any debris. And also, you know that for the lunar missions, we also communicate with other countries and also provide them the orbital parameters of our lunar orbiters and also the Mars orbiters as well, to avoid any collision or possible collision with spacecraft of other countries. So this is a reasonable attitude, and also you know that for the Shenzhou spacecraft and also for the long march launch vehicles, either for the launch of the Shenzhou spacecraft and the cargo spacecraft, we also announce the orbital parameters for provide this to other countries. If anything wrong happened to the orbital parameters, if any occasion of the collision, so they can have some measures to avoid this.
It seems that we are about to get some visuals from our astronauts as crowds are now approaching the return capsule and the cameras are also ready.
As we just heard from the voice of the ground team, the medics are preparing the chairs, the seats for the astronauts. So Mr. Ye Guangfu will be first one to sit in the chairs, and I believe that your colleagues from the CMG will have a short interview with him.
Yeah, and usually when they step out of the capsule, they would wave to the crowds there, welcoming them back, and you know, make a few brief remarks.
Yeah.
Maybe short this time. It's cold.
Yeah. This is CGTN special coverage of the return journey of the SHENZHOU-18 mission. Live pictures now from Inner Mongolia Autonomous Region in northwest China, where the trio, the 3 Taikonauts on board the SHENZHOU-18 mission, made a safe landing 30 minutes ago. And we are awaiting visual of our astronauts stepping out of the capsule. They spent 6 months at the Tiangong space station. Commander Ye Guangfu has become the first Chinese astronaut to have spent more than a year in space. And this is his second journey to space.
Okay, we just heard a voice that Mr. Ye Guangfu is ready to go out.
Let's watch this moment. And every time when we, you know, expect to see our returning astronaut, we would want to know their physical well-being, their conditions, and their mental state, of course.
Yeah. Yes. So, although actually speaking, Mr. Ye Guangfu is still very young, but he already been a veteran for 2 missions. And another very meaningful thing for this mission is that Mr. Li Cong and Ye Guangfu, although as I mentioned only 35 or 36 years old, but also become veterans with this mission.
And compared to these veterans, we have very young generation of astronauts operating the SHENZHOU-19 mission, operating the Tiangong space station right now. Some 2 of them, 2 out of the 3
Mr.
were born
Song Lingdong and Miss Wang Haoze.
after 1990.
Yeah. And what pride me is that Miss Wang Haoze is not only the 3rd female astronaut, but the first one as my colleague from the space industry. She's an expert on rocket engine.
Rocket engine.
Yeah.
And I think her portfolio has made her the first female
Flight
space
engineer.
engineer. Right, flight engineer.
Flight engineer. So the first flight engineer is Mr. Zhu Yangzhu. But you know that Mr. Zhu Yangzhu is a professor in university. So I believe that the experts from the industry, they have different knowledge and have different experience and different skill comparing with those from the universities. So it's very important to have the astronauts selected from the industry.
From diverse backgrounds as well.
Diversity is a basic concept of the IF community. Gender, geography, generation.
Sure.
Called 3G and the diversity.
So the fourth batch of astronauts have been selected and
10 astronauts of the fourth batch were selected, 8 as pilots and 2 act as payload experts. More interesting is that all the payload experts were selected from Hong Kong and Macau.
All right, that certainly also reflects the diversity of backgrounds you mentioned just now. Now, the commander, Mr. Ye Guangfu, has been carried out from the return capsule. As we mentioned, this is not because he's in a bad physical condition, but because of the loss of...
Then we can see the interview from your colleague.
Right. And he's now seated in the chair that the ground staff has prepared.
He acted as what we call the 03 in the SHENZHOU-18 mission. But this time, he's already become the commander of the whole mission.
Yeah.
叶光夫你好，我是中央广播电视总台的记者，2次进驻中国空间站。
For your experience of twice entry into the space station and as an astronaut who have stayed in the space for over 1 year, what do you want to say to us now returning to the Earth? I'm proud of my country. I'm grateful to China and to the Chinese people and also all of the staff working on the ground so that we can return safely on the Earth. For the Shenzhou crew, we just had a handover. I believe that in the near future, the Chinese people will break new historical records in the space. Now, this time, during my orbit in the space, I felt deeply that China's astronomy industry is developing quickly, and we will always bear in mind the mission that the country and all our people have bestowed on us to make new contributions. Thank you.
Commander Ye Guangfu there making his short remarks on his return mission, and he's safe and sound. He had this big smile on his face, and for him this is a matter of national pride. He's confident that the future generation of astronauts will make more milestones in China's space missions. And the commander is the first to face the crowd, the welcoming crowd. And we'll be waiting for the other 2 astronauts to...
And please be aware that he is a record maker for our accumulated time in outer space. Yeah. 1 year.
It's quite remarkable, even with comparison to the other astronauts.
Well,
international.
Honestly speaking, we still have a long way to go to catch up with from the view of experiences. You know that the highest record for one single mission is made by Mr. Polyakov. Who has just passed away several years before. He made the record of 437 days, more than 437 days in a single mission in outer space.
So we can see that the commander, Mr. Ye Guangfu, is being transported to a medical vehicle, I would say, to conduct further examination.
There are 3 this kind of medical ground vehicles dedicated for these 3 crew members. You know, they even have bathroom inside, so very convenient for all of them.
Of course. After their long time stay in the Tiangong space station, it is time to readjust to the environment that they were so familiar with. This is the homecoming moment for our Shenzhou-18 astronauts. We have two more. Li Cong and Li Guangsu will step out of the return capsule and meet the welcoming crowd in just a moment.
So Mr. Li Cong also make a record that he is now the youngest Chinese coming back from outer space.
And he's now 35 years old.
Only 35 years old.
Only 35.
Yeah. He's so young but so experienced. I from my personal view, so I think that he has sufficient chance to walk on the moon in the future. Because
Could
he's
you
so
identify
young.
from the visual we're getting right now?
Probably that will be Mr. Li Cong.
Mr. Li Cong, the 35-year-old who spent 6 months in space. So Li Cong graduated from China's Aviation University of Air Force, and he was selected to be a member of the third batch of Chinese astronauts in 2020, waving at the welcoming crowd.
Welcome home. This is your first voyage in the space, completing all the tasks in the space. What do you want to share with us? Thank you for the question. Hello, everyone. I would love to thank all the Chinese people for your concern about us, and also for those astronomy-related staff. Thank you for your support of our journey. We have been pursuing our dream, and we work as one. We have 2 spacewalks, very smooth process. I think for the research undertaking, we're going on very well. As expected, we have completed the Shenzhou-18 spacecraft mission, but our journey to the space is an endless journey. We will try to recover as quickly as possible so as to dive into the daily training at an earlier date. And I hope to come back to the space one day in the near future. In terms of building China into a strong aerospace country, I want to contribute more.
Now there we heard Li Cong, the 35-year-old astronaut, making a very calm remark there, and he was already talking about returning to the vigorous training to contribute furthermore to China's space mission. So that's quite heroic.
And it's been fast-tracked as well. So usually the pilots need 4-year training. It's been 3 years, and then the experienced pilots they've been going back up there after 2 years of extra training. That's pretty short as well. So the entire Chinese program is being squeezed in terms of condensed in terms of timeline because so many interesting, ambitious projects coming up, and we really need good pilots, which is why all of them are going up there quite rapidly.
So earlier we mentioned it usually takes about 6 months for them to fully recover, fully readjust to the Earth's environment, and then if they go on another mission in 2 years' time, it means that the training will resume pretty soon afterwards.
Right, after 6 months, he'll go back straight to it.
This also proves that our training schedule are greatly optimized compared with the early stage. You know that during the maiden flight of Mr. Yang Liwei, we don't have any experience in this kind of training before. So today we've already been very practical. We have so many astronauts who have already become veterans, and also with Mr. Ye Guangfu already stayed more than 1 year accumulated in outer space.
Sure. So Li Cong was being transported to the medical vehicle, and we're waiting to hear the remark from Li Guangsu.
Who's also a pilot. So you can see that they're really training the pilots as much as possible.
That's right.
All these 3 crew members were fighter pilots
Former fighter
of the Air Force
pilots.
before.
Yeah. And this is the first space mission for Li Cong and Li Guangsu. But considering their age, this is already a remarkable accomplishment.
Mr. Li Cong and Li Guangsu are the 5th and the 6th astronauts from the 3rd batch of the China's astronaut groups to conduct flight missions. So
for them, this is a dream come true, but then we also have astronauts who have also undergone vigorous training, but who haven't really realized their space dreams.
Exactly. Actually speaking, we have 14 astronauts in our first batch, but 5 of them never have the chance to go to outer space. So they are also heroes in my mind.
Absolutely. Now, Li Guangsu is being seated right out of the return capsule, waving to the crowd. Welcome home.
As you mentioned, the 5 astronauts are Wu Jie, Chen Quan, Pan Zhanchun, Zhao Chuandong, and Li Qinglong. So all these 5 heroes are, in my mind, as great as those who have already conducted flight missions.
Hello, Mr. Li Guangsu. I come from CGTN, and this is our first journey into the space. Now coming back to the planet Earth, so anything you want to share with us? I'm grateful to China and the Chinese people. The space is limitless and miraculous. That's an extraordinary experience for me, and I did enjoy it. Now coming back to the Earth, I feel excited coming home, and at the same time, I still linger on my experience in the space. I'm deeply impressed that I'm so grateful and proud of my country. To build China into a major power in the space, we need to rely on the future generations of the astronauts. We will always remain true to our mission and responsibility to create more miracles. See you in Beijing.
Now that was astronaut Li Guangsu making a brief remark, and what touched me there was that he actually mentioned their home in space. 太空家园 in his own words, and that means the TANGO space station is a home away from home. And now we've seen all 3 astronauts safe and sound making their way back home. Again, these 3 astronauts are Ye Guangfu, Li Cong, and Li Guangsu.
It's already from the tradition that your colleagues from CMG will have first interview with all crew members of every flight mission after they came back home.
Yeah, and I'm sure our teams of reporters there have been waiting for a long time for this historic moment. Very cold there. Right now is 2:17 a.m. Beijing time, same time there. And now we've got official announcement, the declaration that the SHENZHOU-18 mission has been a success. So all 3 astronauts are being transported to the medical vehicles, waiting to be further examined, making sure they're physically sound. And then there's going to be this quarantine period.
Yeah.
Waiting them ahead are this lengthy recovery process.
And after this, after 3rd stage of the recovery procedure, you know that usually, according to the previous traditions, there will be a press conference for the 3 crew members facing the media. So at that moment, there will also your colleagues from CGTN to have direct face-to-face interview with them.
Absolutely. Now, as we welcome back our SHENZHOU-18 astronauts, we also wish the best of success and all the smooth operation for our SHENZHOU-19 crew who arrived at the Tiangong space station a few days ago. And they two are going to spend 6 months up there.
As Mr. Zhou Xianping mentioned, in the future, it's possible we will conduct mission of continuous stay in outer space for 1 year.
So, gentlemen, it was a great success for our astronauts. The landing, every one of them was safe and sound in great physical condition. And as for the later missions up there, the SHENZHOU-19 mission, what are some of the things that you're watching out for?
Well, as we've already heard from the press conference of the China Manned Space Agency, we will continue to conduct the EVA in 1 or 2 EVA during the SHENZHOU-9 mission. One important thing is to provide protection and additional protection of the very critical parts outside